When We Disagree is a show about arguments, how we have them, why we have them, and their impact on our relationships and ourselves. Let's say you're asking a friend for advice about how to ask a crush out on a date. The friend gives you some really great advice like, well, do it or don't do it. She'll either say yes or no. Not only is this terrible advice, but it's also based on some simple assumptions about the world. Do it or don't, and yes or no seem like they're the only options or potential outcomes, but lots of us have experienced some real gray areas and confusion in the middle of those. The false dilemma, also called the false dichotomy, the false binary, or the either-or fallacy, is one of the sneakiest around. This is when someone sets up a situation where you're forced to choose between two options, as if those are the only ones available, even though there could be a whole range of possibilities. Think about it like a relationship ultimatum. Either you come home from work early, or you don't care about me. The trap is that it ignores the fact that you could, of course, still care and still want to leave work on time. You might even be able to find a way to meet both needs. These are common. You're in or you're out. Live free or die. Vote or die. Love it or leave it. You're with us or you're against us. You're part of the problem or you're part of the solution. Happy wife, happy life. Put up or shut up. Good versus evil. It's not just about what's being said. It's about the underlying assumption that only these two choices matter. When this kind of thinking creeps into our arguments, it's easy to feel cornered, and sometimes the person wielding the false dilemma knows that. They want you to feel like there's no middle ground, no room to negotiate or think critically. The next time you're faced with an ultimatum like this, ask yourself if this is the only real choice you have. More often than not, you'll find that there are plenty of options outside of the two being presented. I'm Michael Lee, Professor of Communication and Director of the Civility Initiative at the College of Charleston. Our guest today on When We Disagree is Kristal Hudson-Randall. Kristal spent 30 years leading complex IT initiatives with dozens of clients in various industries, including government, healthcare, finance, insurance, oil and gas. After 30 years, she then transitioned into the classroom as a sixth grade English teacher before fully retiring. Kristal, tell us an argument story.
Sure, I'd like to. It's not so much an argument with an individual as it is an argument with my fellow countrymen and women. There was a recent court case where a young soldier or ex-soldier, I believe, it was on a New York subway train, encountered someone who was behaving, I don't know how, aggressively, dangerously, frighteningly to other passengers. He took control of the situation by putting the person in a chokehold. He passed away, and this gentleman was taken to trial for it. They charged him with manslaughter. The jury deadlocked on manslaughter. The manslaughter charge was dropped. And then the ex-soldier was not held to account for killing this troubled individual.
And just to be clear, this is the case of Jordan Neely, who was choked to death by Daniel Penny in New York.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. So for me, this is just one in an almost daily parade of what I find to be fundamental instances where marginalized people are dehumanized, So it's I was just watching an NCIS episode where a young woman ex-corpsman dived in to save someone. And in the storyline, she's then charged because, of course, she's not a health professional. And so that's illegal. So even though she tried to prevent the deaths of some folks, she was, arrested and charged. Now, mind you, that was fictional, but the circumstance is valid and real and actual. It's, you don't get to legally act like you are a licensed healthcare professional when you aren't one. But somehow we have no problem with this, ex-soldier acting like a law enforcement entity
Mm-hmm.
when he had absolutely no right to do so, and ending someone's life. And we're like, it's okay. And I, I've grown to accept these kinds of fundamental issues or instances where, so long as it's a marginalized person, person of color, an immigrant, a disabled person, a mentally ill person, pick your poison. Their lives are just fundamentally worth less, particularly, you know, particularly when those lives are impacted, cut short by white American men.
Mm.
And I have kind of reached my maximum capacity where I just no longer believe that, like Anne Frank, that most people are really good at heart.
Mm. I want to ask you a question about your use of the collective pronoun we as we kind
Mm,
of get into what the conflict is. As you were recounting the story of Daniel Penny or the
mm,
Kyle Rittenhouses of the world, or insert
mm.
storyline here,
Exactly.
just to make your case, you said, and then we act like we have no problem with this, and then you
Hmm.
said, and we're like it's okay when this
Yeah.
life is lost. But then you
Yeah.
concluded, and then you concluded with a more general statement about
Mhm.
how much hope you have in your average citizen colleague, the hope you rest in strangers. But then you also are identifying cases and explicitly said it where the perpetrators are white
Hmm.
American men who are not held
Yes.
accountable, and then
Yeah.
the
Yeah. Yeah.
victims are marginalized members of marginalized communities. So, who
Mm.
is the we that you're talking about? Is it all of us? Is it
Yes.
a very
American
specific,
citizens,
a very
of which
specific?
I count myself one. Absolutely.
Uh huh.
Yeah.
And so, as we get to to recognize the conflict here, you open by saying you have a conflict with your fellow countrymen, more or less,
Yes. Yeah.
and
Absolutely.
and is that conflict about power dynamics? Is that conflict about the meaning of freedom in this country? Is that conflict about hope and the hope of a peaceful, cosmopolitan, egalitarian society? What do you think the basis of that conflict is?
Oh, the short answer is yes. The short answer is yes. I think that all of those things, unfortunately, are kind of on the table and being pushed to the limit. Who do we consider, human? Who do we consider, you know, uh, uh, a person worthy of civil rights? When do we let it? When do we agree to when did we agree to be so unjust as a society? When do we say that it was okay? I think that I look at the kind of the system we have in place and the aspirational goal of justice and the expectation of fairness that we have set. But then I look at how we meter out uh, what behavior we allow as a society. It just doesn't match up. It just doesn't.
Yeah, and this is where the collective pronoun use I'm interested in. You keep saying we,
Mm.
but
Yeah.
it sounds to me, at least implicitly, and I'm putting words in your mouth, so feel free to disagree. It sounds a little bit like you're talking about they. And so I'm interested in why you're talking about
Why we?
why you're
Oh,
talking about a they, like you are not the justice system.
no.
You are not committing
Well, no,
these
yes, I
crimes.
am. I mean, I
Okay.
am part of it, as is every citizen. I mean, that's why, I mean, I say we because I'm included in that we, whether I like it or not. I
Mm.
mean, I absolutely am an American and a patriotic one at that. And I, yeah, so I can't divest myself of from being in that group or sharing that blame. It is we. It's me too.
Mm. You were talking
So yeah,
about
I know it sounds like I'm doing a they, but
mhm.
I am we.
Yeah. And you were also talking about how these kinds of stories lead you to some suspicion about how many people are really capable of goodness. So,
Oh
sort of your
yeah,
trust
absolutely.
in strangers, your hope and the whole human coexistence, peacefulness project.
I have my real doubts. Yeah, I
Is
really do. I the distrust for me is the thing, and it's been it's for me it's been a lifetime of drip, drip, drip,
mhm,
right? Um, and it's I'm my cup overfloweth.
yeah,
So I remember if you go back 30, 40 years ago, I was I think a very hopeful individual. I really was, I would have been, if you'd asked my 25-year-old self, do you think that a better understanding of your fellow citizen, more communication, open sharing of perspectives um, could lead to a better society? I would have said, oh my gosh, absolutely. And more than that, I am willing, I'm willing to stand as tribute and have those difficult conversations with people because I think it can change minds and hearts and bring us together, or at least create a sense of empathy in which we can share. And simply do not think that that is the case today.
what would it
And
take to
more
restore that
importantly,
hope?
oh, I'm sorry.
What would it take to restore that hope? I mean, because for each of these stories, and I speak here more as in a sense of testing these ideas, not proselytizing. I have a people who've listened to this show know I certainly wouldn't do the show and lead the initiatives that I lead without a greater hope in the communicative collective reasoning project. And I also have a much admitted deeply cynical side. Um, and so I say this in the spirit of healthy debate, not destructive argument, which is for the stories like the subway story that you opened with, we can find, let's say, Daryl Davis's story of personally persuading 200 Klansmen to give up their robes and kind of see the
Yes,
light of common
yes,
humanity as opposed to racial bias. And so
yeah,
I feel like I could find stories to counter some of the more negative stories you're talking about.
absolutely,
And so
absolutely.
what would it take to restore the hope that you had in the sharing of perspectives that you might have had when you were, say, 25?
Well, yeah, for me, I don't know how you could do it.
Mm.
Honestly, I don't see, I don't know, I don't currently see a path forward or a way back. I want to go back to your point, though. You're absolutely right, and I love that particular story about the in my head the Klan man, the Klan talker, because that's the kind of thing that does, I think, that is hopeful, right? And there's absolute counterpoint to to my to my perspective. For me, the challenge with that is that I've reached a point in my life where I understand that I can never. I do hate to use the word never, but I'm going to stick to it this time. That I cannot be him. I will not be him. That is not my story. That's not my path. I'm not doing it,
Yeah.
and I don't know who is.
Yeah, I mean
You
that's
know,
really the challenge of his and a few other stories like it is how do you do that collective persuasion work and put yourself in real danger with people who really
uh-huh,
dislike you and do it at
that part.
scale, right? It's
Yeah,
almost as if
exactly. Yeah, and
folks.
with the I mean the first point being I realized that I know the suffering of the saints is not the way I want to go. I'm no, I just don't. I my own shortcoming is that I don't care enough about my fellow man
Mhm.
to do what he
Mhm.
did. I've maxed out. Before the drip 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 got quite this high, I was still at a place where I would be willing to say, "Oh yes, I'll engage." Yeah, sure, I would make some element of sacrifice. But now, no, absolutely not,
Strikes
absolutely
me
not.
as kind of reminiscent of the quotation. I think it's attributed to Hemingway, but I'm not a literature person, so I could butcher this about going broke. You go broke slowly at first and then all at once, right? And this is the drip, drip, drip you're talking about.
Exactly, exactly.
How do
That's
you
it.
become
Exactly.
hopeless, right? Slowly at first,
And
and
then
then
all at once.
and
That's
then all at
exactly
once.
it. It was a weird thing when I realized I crossed it,
Mm,
where I was like, "Oh yeah, that feeling of yeah, It's a little tiring. Maybe I don't feel emotionally like I really want to share, but you know what? I'm going to engage and let's see where this goes. And now, the stakes have to be so personally high and specifically beneficial to me before I will even think about,
Mm-hmm.
uh, going to that place with someone. I just no, my fellow man, you're not worth it. No,
Are
I
you
think not.
more, for lack of a better word, cloistered, shut off, purposefully removed from encounters with different folks than you used to be? In other words, does this move into relative hopelessness coincide with a move into relative privacy?
On so many levels, yes, but it's not, to be truly honest, it's not entirely um, a response to this situation, this feeling, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
some of it is still a holdover from COVID. Some of it is, I just am out there a little bit less than I used to be. Um, some of it is being retired,
Mm-hmm.
not being, not going into a workplace or being surrounded by work people every day makes a big difference. So there's kind of a natural um, uh, retiring from society that comes with retirement. So some of it is that, for sure. Some of it is
Yeah,
that,
some of
but
it's
absolutely,
circumstantial. Yeah,
I'm sorry.
some of it's circumstantial, it sounds like,
Hmm.
but not all of
Yes.
it. I'm going to ask you a big one as we kind of move to close here, which is speaking from my own point of view, there is a kind of mm, goodness trap, right? Which is that how much goodness do we attribute to strangers? How much goodness, how much hope do we have in their ability to reason, their ability to practice something that feels like goodness or justice to all of us? And so on the one
Mm,
hand, it's really important to keep yourself safe. I wouldn't
mm,
just approach everybody and be as vulnerable as possible and assume that they are capable of goodness,
yeah.
especially if we have half decent reason to believe that X, Y, or Z person or X, Y, or Z group of people don't like me, wish me harm, behave in ways that are anathema to my continued existence.
Mm,
And at the same time, if we're all uncharitable to one another all of the time, the situation gets immeasurably worse because so much violence, discrimination, anger, rage, etc., that exists in our world today is because of X, Y, or Z group of people having uncharitable assumptions about other groups of people. And so, on the one
yes.
hand, it's necessary to keep ourselves safe and view the world relatively realistically about what's going
Mhm.
on, why it's happening, and how to keep ourselves out of harm's way deliberately.
Yeah.
And the world gets easier to navigate and our democracy becomes easier to live in, the more
Mhm.
charitable we are to other fellow humans. And so when you're
That,
talking about this problem of hopelessness, that pickle is that dilemma is really striking to me. I don't think you're approaching this from a kind of strictly rational point of view where you're saying, well, this is my conclusion and this is all the evidence. You seem, if I can put words in your mouth, a little ambivalent about it, like you're not thrilled with this conclusion, but here you are. It's almost like a felt sense.
no, that's absolutely true. It's a life experience since
Right.
it's absolutely comes from an emotional place. It's not logical. It's not as though I've stacked up evidence. I mean, to be fair, my own, when it comes down to my own personal existence, I have led a carefree existence.
Mm.
I'm well cared for. I've never suffered unduly. My parents did everything they could, to prepare me for the world that I live in. So I've just been just profoundly fortunate. I have not suffered.
Mm.
Uh, I have not personally suffered these things that that drive my that drive my feelings about where we are as a society.
Yeah.
I have simply not been, discriminated against very often or deeply in my life, or hurt by specific, physical danger based on my race. Rarely in my life. Even so, and here's the thing: it's I feel it deeply when it happens to other people in my circumstance, because it is just a matter of luck of the draw. So, but for anything, it could have been me.
Right.
And that weight of walking around with that all the time is just,
yeah, it's sort of like an overwhelming risk of bad luck.
Exactly. Which is no luck at all. It's by design. I'm like, really? Really? So even though I've been fortunate and it doesn't happen to me all the time, every time it happens randomly to someone else, I feel it.
Yeah.
And it's another drip, drip, drip. Yeah.
What's the lesson you draw? What would you recommend to others? Because on the one hand, you're saying, this is what I feel, this overwhelming sense of bad luck that's not really even luck. It's sort of by systemic design. And also, on the other hand, you're not really saying everybody should feel this way. So I don't hear you up on the mountaintop saying, wake up and become hopeless, everyone.
No. I mean, if anything, I hope that others do retain hope and that they march on. I'm just not going to march with.
That's a great place to close. Kristal Hudson-Randall, thank you so much for being on When We Disagree.
Thank you.
When We Disagree is recorded at the College of Charleston with creator and host Michael Lee. Recording and sound engineering by Jesse Kunz and Lance Laidlaw. Reach out to us at whenwedisagree@gmail.com.